Well, good afternoon. Well, morning, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm going to type into the chat box that you should have sound. And if you do not, we'll know that there's a problem. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming today and taking time out of our busy COVID lives to talk about the importance of aligning your content and your assessments to your learning objectives. And I know that sometimes this can seem overwhelming or unimportant. And so we're just going to walk through some of, why it matters and give you some tools. And as we go on, there'll be a few there's an activity we're going to do together, and then there'll be a breakout. So people may pop in, but in respect for your time, we're going to get started. And so again, we're here to discuss aligning content and learning objectives to improve student learning success. So let me also put in, that's the link to the main shared folder in Google Docs. As we go through the program, I will also, if there's a direct link to something that might be easier to get to, I will put that as well as we go through. And these will be available to you after the program. You can download anything that's in there, and I have shared it all with you. My email is going to be listed at the end. I will provide it in chat as well. But should you have any troubles with that after the fact, please let me know, and I'll make sure you get everything that you need. Remain muted unless you're speaking to the group, as you probably have already experienced today. We get feedback or weird noises. So we'll just move along. Hopefully there will be no Zoom bombing, but if we do get Zoom bombed, these are just some quick little tips for how we'll handle this. You'll turn off your video if you have it on. You'll mute your microphone. If you're in the breakout room, which we're only going to do once, immediately return to the main room. And at that point, I will have already tried to get the person out, and I'll let you know if we can continue, but if not, we'll have to exit the session. So let's get started. And of course, Evil Raccoon, it's really not going to be that bad. That's to make you dread it a little more, and then hopefully you'll think this is great. So instructional alignment. We want to talk about objectives, activities, and assessment. It's the whole kit and caboodle there. So content, activities, and assessments, they're more than just drilling and testing, and they're more than just doing that so you can assign a grade. They should make up a system that provides feedback to the student about their learning, because that's going to help them be more successful. And I want you to consider an approach where we use Bloom's taxonomy to improve the student learning. We are going to use the revised Bloom's, and I'm not going to bore you with a whole bunch of nitty-gritty about where it came from and all of that. We will go over it, though, in case you're either not familiar with it or need a little refresher. And so when we do that, we're going to use that taxonomy to improve that system that I just talked about through the alignment of the objectives, the activities, and the assessments, all with each other. So in order to do that, we need to be able to write observable learning objectives and choose formative content that supports those. And then choose the assessment that accurately assesses the content that we taught. And hopefully that's also the content that we told them that they were going to learn. So this ultimately leads us to content and assessments that are aligned to those objectives. And when activities and assessments are lined up with the ultimate objectives, you have what's called alignment. And you've probably heard that it's a big thing with Quality Matters, which is important, but it's also really important for student success. It helps them know from the start where they think they're going to go and what they're going to do. So we are going to do a poll, and this poll is an opportunity for you to tell me what you really think about learning objectives. And I can't see who chose what. I made it anonymous, so let's be honest. Even if it's, the answer is, I think they're dumb, that's okay. But I'm going to have to launch the poll. It might take me just a second, so let me get to that. And you should now be able to see them. Please let me know if no one is seeing it. And you can look these over, take a little time, pick the one you want. And y'all are really good. I think everybody has posted, and if not, I'm sure it'll come in. So just to give you an idea, and I'm going to ignore that. I just want to take a little picture of it so I'll have it so I don't forget it. So about 17% of you say you pull it directly from the textbook, and 67% of you say you use it to guide your course, which is amazing and awesome, and thank you for that. And I thank the person who is totally honest and said that they think it's pointless, that students don't read them or care about them, and one person said it's necessary evil. So that just kind of lets you know that, you know, everybody has a feeling about learning objectives. I always joke and say it's polarizing. It's, you never know how someone's going to react when you bring up learning objectives. So thank you for participating in the poll. And you can see it right there real quick. That's exactly what I just told you. But the majority of you do feel like it can help you guide your class. And I can't get out of the polling. Hang on just a second. It'll let me end it probably in a second. You know what? I'm going to just hide it, I think. I don't know why it's, I apologize, everyone. I know it's terrible when somebody keeps clicking and saying they don't know where something is or it got moved. Oh, I know exactly what I did. So there we go. So thank you again for that. So we're going to get a little deeper in. You know, I kind of touched on it, but course alignment, the objectives are really the expectations for student performance. So it's a connection between activities and assessment, and we want that to match up so that the students learn what you intend. And you can accurately assess what they've learned or what they can do. If the objectives are expectations about student performance, then we need to be able to verbalize to the student and to ourselves what we want that student to be able to do when they finish. You know, can they do standard precautions properly? Do they know how to interview a patient? I mean, these things are super important. It's, you know, if it's vague or unclear, students will feel that. Even if they're not reading up the objectives, even if you write that objective and you put it out there, you can still verbalize it to them and talk to them. You know, you're gonna be able to do X. I'm gonna make you a better nurse. I'm gonna make you a better tech, whatever that may be. So if they're written in ways that clearly state what they're gonna learn, and again, like I said, that you can also be verbalizing it later. And it's written in the student voice, then we've set a stage for them to be successful, because good objectives can be referred back to throughout activities or assessments to show them why it's important. Because, you know, there's often that, I'm never going to do this, or why are we doing this? And that's when you can say, well, it makes you a better healthcare provider because. And so if we can tie the objectives to the rest of the course, it also shows them the learning path. And I know that kind of gets us into metacognition, where we're wanting them to be able to think about how they learn, and that's a big project, and I get that, and we're not going to go deep into metacognition in this because I know you just attended something on that, but I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, that it's also going to support that metacognitive growth. So, and as students become more aware of their own learning and have that ability to control and monitor and regulate that learning, it really does feed into the metacognition. So the activities, those are the things, you know, that's the experiences that prepare them to be successful in their assessments that you're going to give them later. And I understand that we often grade on formative, and that's fine. No one thinks that that's inappropriate. It's just I want you to think of these as the building blocks. So if they're engaging in activities or content, even if it's the reading, you've picked appropriate targeted reading that helps them achieve that learning objective, then we're being successful. Because students do complain. I mean, and to be fair, sometimes they complain totally without reason, or, you know, their perception is different than ours. But we hear them say, nothing we taught in class was on the test, or I wasn't prepared for the test because it wasn't anything from lecture. It was all from the book or something like that. And so we want to give them not only the path, but it supports you and what you've done and what you assess on later. So, you know, activities that model the objective clearly, that inspires confidence. All you have to do it is one time. It inspires confidence in the student that we're engaging them properly and that the things that you give them will help them be successful. And I know that real life and talking about it are often very different, and that the student has to actually do the stuff and be prepared or they won't be successful. So I'm not at this point talking about that type of thing. I am saying we're giving them the tool. So if it's truly formative and aligned, again, tools. I keep talking about that, but they are getting tools that help them be much more successful on those higher stake summative items. And then assessments. You know, it all does come to that. Is this on the test? Will this be on the test? Are you going to test me on this? How much does this count? So, you know, as we know, the learning assessment, it's the system and the process by which you're collecting evidence about their learning or their knowledge or their skill. And so you have to observe or record or score them. You have to interpret what you're seeing. And, you know, a good system of assessment gives them feedback about their learning. It gives feedback to you if they're having trouble. Like if everybody's falling down on something, then you're getting that feedback. So, you know, you maybe you aligned it really well, but we got to do something slightly different. And it supports your judgment about the grading. So think about it from that respect too. I mean, it absolutely supports what you've assigned. You've assigned a grade. It's not arbitrary. And so there's your argument. I told you what we were going to do. I told you how we were going to grade it. And this is why you got a C, or however that goes. So beyond giving you that solid argument, the aligned assessments can measure what we told the student that we were going to measure. And I know I keep bringing that up, but I think it's really important that the student gets a clear and consistent message, because sometimes we have to say things a bunch before it kind of sinks into folks. And it is going to improve their chances for success at the point. And y'all, please forgive my COVID hairdo. I know that it's long and doing weird things, so I apologize. But it improves their success because we've given them relevant content and the formative activities. And then so our measurement is based on those things. We're measuring what we taught. And I know that seems like you're so basic. You're like, yes, I mean, I've been an instructor for X number of years. I've been in nursing for a really long time. I know that. But sometimes it's easy for us to get off track. So that I just want to impress upon you that sometimes when we get those complaints that you didn't test me on what you taught me, maybe they're not seeing it, and you know, maybe something else happened. But let's think about alignment to try to avoid that going forward. And so I've been talking about this a lot. It is important because it keeps all of us on the right path. We're all going in the right direction. When everything is directly related and, you know, truly aligned with one another, it's easier to hit targets. And that's students can hit their targets of the grade they want, or the degree or the certification they need. And it's the target that you can hit of being effective and, you know, having a good pass rate and knowing that you're sending people out there who can do their jobs and do it well. And so if they're not aligned, I'm not saying these are hard and true. This isn't like a law of gravity. But if they're not aligned, your course can become fragmented or it could be ineffective. So, because the students might receive a mixed message about what they should learn. And if they're spending time on activities that don't lead to intended goals, then you're wasting their time and it's not helping you help them be successful. So the one thing that really might hurt your end as far as development, or if you want to tweak your course, if it's not aligned, you might have the problem of over or underestimating the effectiveness of the instruction. So if they're aligned and as a professional, you're like, here's my objective, and I've always done this content and this assessment, and you take a deep breath and you step back, you might be able to say, oh, you know what, that's better for chapter 9 because it's important that they know this, but maybe not here. And so it has to be reflective on your end. So having said all that, and I say this, we know alignment is important. Well, I hope we know alignment is important, but I also understand that everyone has their own thoughts on that. But it really does provide for success. But aligning a course, I mean, that's a lot harder than just talking about it, much like motivating students. We talk about motivating students, we talk about metacognition, but you know, in practice, these things are much harder than just talking about it. So I mentioned earlier Bloom's. So one way is to use a learning taxonomy. And beyond just it being this theoretical thing that somebody thought up and wrote a dissertation on a million years ago, it does have a purpose, and that purpose is to help you classify your objectives and then select those activities and assessments that align towards that. And there's a bunch, I don't say there's a bunch, but there's more than one. But Bloom's is the most common, and it was huge and it was big. And a while back, they came up with the revised Bloom's. And like I said earlier, we're not going to go through the history of Bloom's. We're not going to, you know, have a big educational theory class. But I want you to keep in mind that it really was designed to provide a classification system for thinking and learning. And it moves from the simple to the complex and concrete to the abstract. So, you know, it also has a path, just like we want to have a path. It goes from simple to harder, and, you know, really, this makes total sense to kind of what we used to call guiding questions, or, you know, things that maybe don't have a yes or no answer. So it also has a progression to it. And this is a quick recap of it. The wording in the pyramid is slightly different from the original, and it is using remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. I know you can read. But that's, they thought that this revised version in the 90s kind of led to a more useful tool for planning. And so that's why I use this one. I like it because, one, it is a little more current, and it's just not as overwhelming. It makes a little more sense. It's a little shorter and just easier to handle. So learning objectives. I've talked about this a lot already, and we're only 20 minutes in. But they really guide our choices. So, you know, every program of instruction or your course or training activity, it doesn't have to be on the academic side. It begins with some sort of goal, and the goal can be broken down into specific goals or learning objectives, and those should be concise statements about, as I've said earlier, what we want the student to do. But that leads us to why it's important, and it is because it guides the student's path, but it guides, as educators, your choices moving forward. And if they're well defined and articulated well, that's important because we again have that clear path, and we can direct the choice of your activities and your assessment strategies appropriately. And again, I always want, the big theory is important and all of that, but I also like you to know that it really does support you as an instructor as well. It's not just about the theory and the hoity-toityness of it. It's about, you know, you really saying, I nailed this, and I know I did. So learning goals and learning objectives, I didn't have this in until just this morning when I got to thinking, you know, there is a lot of confusion about a goal and an objective. I mean, yes, they're both something we want them to do, but a goal is more about what you want to accomplish in the course, is in the overall goal doesn't necessarily result in observable or measurable behavior. It's just so you know, that's kind of the goal is much bigger, and it can be much more overarching. That kind of deals more with pathways and what we'll do in COL. It deals with, you know, the big picture, whereas the objectives that you're going to write, those are brief and clear, and they're about what the student's going to do and be able to know or replicate when they complete this particular instruction, not when they're completely done with the course or not when they're completely done with their program. This is the small Lego brick and not the big castle that you build. So I just kind of want you to understand the difference between the goal and the objective, because sometimes I know if you've been through the revision process with us, if you don't pull your objectives from the book and you write your own, sometimes people say, that's a goal, and we need to tweak that. So that's where that's coming from. So that's just a little bit of that. One thing that's really effective is for us to make sure that there's one measurable verb in the objective. This might mean you end up with more objectives than you're used to having, but, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I do need it to be one, I need it to be measurable. So we want them to be able to know that they have to define something or recall something or identify it. But things like understand or know, I mean, that's admirable that we want them to truly understand things. And understand is on the taxonomy, but that's because you want them to understand. That doesn't mean that you're going to use it in your objective. You will, within the understand level of cognitive process, find a measurable, definable verb. And so that brings us to the one verb, because more than one, it muddies the waters for them and you. Because a student can master the objective or they can fail to master the objective. And if the objective has two verbs, such as define and apply, how do you measure when they define it but they don't apply it? Are they demonstrating mastery, or, you know, is it partly? So a common one that we see a lot, and we've all done it, and it's so hard to break the habit, is compare and contrast. And we've all been asked to do it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times you get a compare and contrast. But again, how do you assess it if they only compare? Because they usually do miss the contrast part for some reason. That's not the part they get. So it's better if you could split that out. I know it seems verbose, but then if you, that way you can easily say, you obviously know the similarities, but you're not getting the differences, so let's talk through that. And then, so this is one of those that I feel like sometimes is confusing. The course level objective, which is those 5 or so that you have that talk about the course as a whole. those verbs, that verb needs to be equal to the highest supporting lesson objective. Because if we can't verify that, for instance, if we can't verify that they can evaluate something, if our lessons only taught them to define something. So think about that. If every lesson they're defining or listing or describing, but your course level objective is different, you know, it falls into a different level, then that's where we're getting this misalignment. And that's hard, and we are not going to break it down into and do these really, really difficult ones. But we're going to talk through all of that, and I'm going to give you some tools that show you how to really tell, did it happen? Like, have I mapped it? And it is a map, and we'll talk about that. But strive to keep all of them clear, measurable, and concise. I mean, that was just a rehash of what we were talking about. And again, I want everyone to know that we understand that it's not as simple as saying, okay, I'm going to use apply and describe. Or, the most challenging part of it is also the most important, which is the observable and the measurable, because again, at learning and understanding their goals, but we can't measure that. It's kind of like a student will read X, Y, and Z. Well, how do you know they really read it? So that was something we used to run into a lot in K-12. We would have troubles with that part of it. It's, you want them to understand it. You want them to review things. You want them to know how to review. Well, that's a little different. So you'd say they need to know how to do research. So break that down into the components that make the success for them. So that's how we get there. But we're going to have a little breakout, and which is a good time for me. I'm going to drink a little bit of water because I know I probably sound terrible. And I'm going to give you, you can go to the folder if you want, or I can send you a direct link to the document that I was going to use. And it takes me a second to do the breakout rooms, but I'm going to send you out into breakout. And what you will see, though, when you go into the document called Learning Objectives Before and After, you're going to see this page that simply says, look at the bottom. And if you'll see where I've put this little red box, there's group 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Each of these tabs has the same objective, so nobody's getting like a better one, I promise. And there's only about 10 of us, so I'll probably make 3 rooms, so nobody will be in group 4 or 5. But if your breakout room will say that you're in breakout room 1, breakout room 2, breakout room 3. And so whichever one you end up in, just go there, and y'all are going to work together. You can turn on your audio there, and in fact, let me pull it up real quick for you. I apologize. I tried to put all of these pictures here that that would help, and then so I hope you can see that. You're going to go into this green one, but I will also give the direct link. And so if you're on this front page and you're group 1, you go here. And everybody, again, has the same objectives. The one that's highlighted was the easiest one of all, so I did that one as the example, sorry. But that's just to show you what we're looking for. And I will warn you that some of them seem pretty good. So maybe you don't think there's anything wrong with it. And if that's the way you feel, you can put there is no problem. And I will tell you that I also agree with one of them that technically has a problem, but I get that it's pretty darn close. And so we'll just talk about the different views on it when y'all work on this. So let me get you the link, the direct link in your chat box, which will make it easier if you just want to go directly there. and then I'm going to break you out. And if you have problems when you're in the breakout room, you can request assistance and it'll tell me. So we'll do 3 rooms. It's going to put 4 to 5 of you in there together. And so just work together, and I'll give you at least 5 to 8 minutes. I mean, there's 5. That doesn't seem like a lot of time. So let's just say 10, but if you guys get all done earlier, maybe you can take a bathroom break, but we will have one of those later as well. So everybody's headed to their rooms. So for those of you who are already back, the breakout rooms are going to automatically shut in about 20 seconds. So we'll just look at each other for 20 seconds. And then everybody will be back. And then, and I'll wait till everybody gets here. We'll talk about what we did, what y'all did.
I'm glad I got in a breakout room where we didn't Zoom bomb other people by accident, like this morning.
Oh, you Zoom bombed somebody by accident this morning? Oh my God.
Somebody else's group.
All right. So I think everybody should be back. And of course, going out in breakout rooms changed the way Zoom looks on my end. So that's the way that runs. But y'all did so good. Everybody was in there doing stuff and typing away. And so thank you very much for being so active. And I am more than happy if somebody wants to talk about it from their group, or if anybody has any questions. But otherwise, you know, I can also just kind of go over our thoughts and look at what you guys did. Most of you caught it, most of it, so good. Does anybody want to talk, or would y'all prefer to go ahead and get to stay quiet? Oh, looks like people are still working. So, okay, so group 1, let's talk about that. And I think I'm just going to click on group 2 and 3. See, look at that. Y'all all got the first one, the fact that there were 2 verbs. And 2 verbs results in that split objective that I was talking about. And student might be half of it, not the other half. And so, yeah, somebody wrote create a marketing plan for your organization. That's perfect. Everybody kind of chose the create, which I really like. So you got rid of the describe, because if you create it, we should all be able to see it. And then become familiar with. That was kind of like what I was talking about earlier. You know, when you say student will be able to explore. You know, we like that. We like them to be able to explore and find their own, you know, learn to bring information to themselves, but it's not measurable. How do you know they explored unless we have them do something measurable? So great work there. We've got list the elements of editing. That's really good. And create a properly edited Word document. So there's a really, that one takes it up a notch from the list. So nice levels of cognitive use there. So thank you, everybody. Complete the assignment. I think we all got that that was a thing you're doing, not something that we're measuring. So everybody came up with that. And explain the benefits of various modalities for an elderly person. So this is the one that I was like, you know, it is pretty measurable and it is pretty specific. So I could see where someone would use this one, and I would probably not call them out on it. I will say that some thoughts are that it's not real student-centered, that it's more sounds like what you might do. Like you're going to explain it to them, and then you need them to do something back. Like they either need to be able to recall the steps or describe it back to you, or determine the most appropriate exercise. But really, that's the one that I said is kind of the trick. It's pretty good. But everybody kind of took it a little bit further too, so thank you. And then formulate a management plan for each of the above. Well, obviously this was intended to be like a fourth of a list of objectives, but each objective must be able to stand alone and not reference others. And you guys got that. Shouldn't refer to the other objectives. It's either too vague or what does that even mean? So great job, guys. Thank you so much. Let me close all my stuff. Get my windows back open so I can see if you guys need me or whatever's going on. And great. So again, my gracious, I went crazy on that. Okay. So I know I promised you a break and it is coming, but I did want to do something a little, kind of prepare us for plotting the course, and then we'll take a break. So told you I was going to give you some tools. And so this doesn't look like it, but in that folder, there is something that looks very similar to this. And this allows you to plot. It's a table. And so you're going to plot what knowledge dimension it's in, and it combines all the original levels of the learning across the top with the types of knowledge on the left. How does this help me at all? Well, it does help you plot a good course. So it gives you a framework for plotting each thing. So I'll show you what one of those looks like, because sometimes just hearing it isn't as good as seeing it for a lot of us. But my goal here is that this would help you approach the course systematically and effectively, as well as focus your learning efforts on the objectives and then select the assessments that fit. So I've covered up part of the table. So this is the categories or levels, which is the first one is remember. And it's recognizing or recalling relevant knowledge, facts, or concepts. So if you want them to remember, that's obviously not going to be your objective verb, because how do you know they remembered it? But so though, that that's one of those lower level of the cognitive functions. And so we know that it wants to be down on that end. The next one is understand. And so we're going to be constructing a meaning from the instructional instructional message. So you want the student to be able to take it a little further. It's more than just giving you back what you told them. They're going to let you know that they've got a deeper understanding of it. And again, we're obviously not going to use understand as our verb. Apply is
Tiffany?
Yes.
Excuse me. I'm so sorry. Are you screen sharing with us at the moment, or just chatting? Are we supposed to be doing something?
I'm so sorry. Those breakout rooms threw me for a loop. Let's go back. I apologize. You're going to have to
Thank you.
No, thank you for letting me know. I would hate that y'all are like, what is she going on about? She says we're going to get to see something. I don't see a thing. Okay. So back to what I was saying a little bit earlier. This is a table of the cognitive process dimension, and it's relating the knowledge dimension across the top with what we want them, what dimension it's actually going to fall into. So I apologize that y'all didn't get to see this earlier. What this table, you will have access to this as a working document in the Google Drive that you can download later. But the idea is, how does this table help me? And it actually will help you plot the course. And we're going to go through the pieces of the table, and then I will plot some things so that it makes more sense than just, again, this kind of weird theory. So I mentioned that the Align course helps the students achieve those goals by matching the objectives and everything that goes with it. And so this table would help you approach that systematically and effectively, focus their learning efforts on the objectives, and then help you select assessments that correspond to the learning. So, so we've got our knowledge dimension, and then we've got these related categories of learning. So the first one is remember. So when we were looking at it as a pyramid, remember was on the bottom. It was that wider one that kind of just is more like recognizing or recalling knowledge and facts or concepts. And then the next one is understand. And as I was saying earlier, you obviously don't use these as your objective verbs. This is your idea of, you know, what level they need to be giving this stuff back to you at. So they need to be able to remember stuff before they can use it to show you that they understand it. And so when they understand it, they're constructing some meaning from what you've taught them, more than just giving it back to you, like I do X, Y, Z. Maybe a good example might be medical terminology. So maybe they can memorize the word and what it means, but understanding the two, you know, the pieces, like the prefix and the base, and if there's a suffix, you know, if they understand those pieces, that's a bigger understanding, and they can construct something from it so they can learn things they wouldn't know before. The next one is apply. And so they're going to use ideas and concepts to solve something. And in your particular discipline, this might be them applying, interviewing patients, like maybe they're taking information you've taught them and ideas and concepts to more effectively perform those intakes. Then analyze is obviously, we keep going higher and higher. And so they're breaking the things down into components and seeing relationships there. And then when they evaluate, they're making a judgment on other criteria. And then the highest one is create. They're taking all this stuff you've given them, and more than just doing a small thing, they're actually reorganizing all of that into a new thing, like a new pattern or a new structure. And that's not, we don't always reach those higher levels, but they're there, and depending on, you know, the goal of the course or what the student needs to do, you know, we may need to go to those higher ones. Now the left side, it lists the types of knowledge in the dimension, and so those are the things that we talked about earlier, from concrete to abstract, but don't necessarily range in complexity. So the ones across the top ranged in complexity, but these is just a classification, really. So you can learn a procedure or a skill, but not necessarily need to master all of the related facts and concepts. But a metacognitive knowledge, I'm getting tired, you know, knowing how to understand something could actually be done at any of the levels. So even though we talk about metacognitive is the what we're striving for, it's the big goal in the sky, we can use it across all of those dimensions. So just know that those kind of stand alone. There are classifications for those higher levels. And the easier way to break that down, and I can share all of this with anybody that wants it, the relationships between the knowledge dimension, such as factual, to the type that supports it, such as basic elements about a subject, is knowing that. So the knowledge dimension, factual, kids know that. Conceptual, that's more, you know, the what and the why. So they understand the principle and generalizations. Procedural dimension is how, like, how do I do this? How do I perform this skill? And so once you think about that, procedural seems high, like it would be higher than factual, but it's not, because they need to remember things to be able to do the procedure. So, you know, they need to, it all kind of plays together, and it's just which one this is focusing on. And then metacognitive, you know, again, that's the point that they know how to know, which means they're more aware of their learning, and they have the ability to control it, monitor, and regulate it. And they should be able to do that with any type of a thing we throw at them. So it's their awareness of their own cognition. So this is just the same table, just not done in PowerPoint. So this is how you would plot your course on the table. It means finding where your objective, your activity, and your assessment line up on the matrix. And so we're going to look at, this actually is just a fun little Flash thing that Flash doesn't work for anybody anymore, but see, so that's was out of alignment. No, it goes quick, and we're going to talk about it. And I will say that as we go through, everything doesn't have to always be exact, but the idea is that we're going to put stuff in these cells. It's not just some weird thing for you to look at that doesn't make any sense. And so I keep harping on this, but it's simpler to talk about than it is to do. And so you have to think about where to plot the objective, the activity, and the assessment. And that requires you to do some pretty complex cognitive process thinking on your own, which I know you do every day related to other things. But generally, I want you to keep in mind that when the objectives, activities, and assessments are in the same cell, alignment is achieved. But in practice, they don't always, and maybe shouldn't always, line up in the same cell. But for the purposes of today, I don't want for this to go on for 3 hours or anything. But we're talking about aligning those things in as we proceed through the rest of the presentation. And I will try to show you when and why they wouldn't always occupy the same cell, but we're not going to do the deepest dive ever, because as you may have been told, there will be opportunities later for you guys to have practices and interactions that support this theory that we're learning today, where you're going to put it into action. So, so today we're going to be just kind of creating that path and thinking how students, when they get all this new information, how it all fits together for them. So that was kind of my idea about, this get off my cloud. They're often going to be the same, but maybe not always. Bye, activity. So this is just kind of tips for the cognitive table. And I've lost some of my notes, I think. Here we go. So there's some natural associations, and I think they, as instructors, they make sense to you. You wouldn't think I was totally off my rocker if I told you that, factual knowledge does require you to remember. So those kind of do go together. And understanding is, again, how you can apply a concept, and apply is the cognitive process that is where you're showing that you have the procedural knowledge. So some of it, even though it looks cumbersome, there are natural progressions that make sense. And so if you're teaching one of those dimensions, you should also be able to assess its cognitive process. And there's other ones, obviously, the analyze, evaluate, and create, and they're more general. So if the students are learning factual knowledge, you can assess their ability to remember it and, apply it, but you can also later, they can analyze it, depending on what levels of function that you need them to do. And then as, again, I told you, we're not going to do these deep dives into metacognition, but I like to show you that there is a link here. It's the awareness of your thinking and learning. And so it's important because it involves those mental strategies that all of us use to solve problems. And so that's how people learn best, but it's harder. And so how well we take tests or what motivates us, all of those fall into metacognition. And it is critical to the learning process, but I want you to realize that it, again, like I said earlier, it flows across all of the entire spectrum. So I don't want you to think if it's metacognition, it's under create or create and evaluate. It can't be under the others because they're not there yet. That's not true necessarily. So when we try to incorporate objectives, activities, and assessments for those more complex things that we were talking about, those processes facilitate retention of the other ones. I mean, they do build on each other. So if you want a student to evaluate a procedure, they're going to have to recall and they're going to have to understand. And so you will teach them to analyze a fact or concept to have that same effect. And this was another little, I just screen shared this. So you've got an objective here, and this is how they're not always necessarily in the same cell, because this all support the need for them to be able to analyze. They can't analyze if they don't understand it. And maybe they need to be able to apply it. So you might need to provide all of these activities. And so this was kind of the idea of when maybe everything's not in the same cell. So I don't want you to feel like everything always has to cram into the same cell, because sometimes it's a building process and no one wants to take that away from you, the ability to build things up. And here's another one. I don't know why that one played on its own. Oh, I guess I hit the click button. So I know this is a lot of text. It's just a wall of screen and it's a writing one, but this is also, let me get you the link. This is in our folder as well, but we can just look at it on the screen. But if you wanted to have it, I wanted you to have the link directly to it. Sorry, my chat window's disappeared. More. There it is. So, but don't feel obligated to go to it. Basically, this would, for a learning objective, asking them to explain the effects of taxes on the colonists, they were asked to research the facts of the historical context and write an editorial article from a persuasive point of view for one of the other sides. So the objective is plotted, and I'm going to have this up on the screen so you won't have to remember all this. The objective is plotted as understand conceptual knowledge, and the objective, though, because we don't want to understand, is going to be explain the effects of England's taxes on American colonists. So that activity, actually have them create something, which was an essay, but they had to be able to evaluate and analyze, even though the objective was to really understand what was going on with England's taxes. You know, we can have activities that support that objective on different places. This is one of those times when they might not all fit, but you have to be careful. So what I do recommend is that if you ever are in doubt, that you can always reach out to any one of us at the Center for Teaching Excellence. But I just wanted to make it clear to people that just because the objective falls in understand and you need them to know it, sometimes you need to assess it a little bit of a higher level. But you just need to be careful because, again, we're back to understanding, you know, supporting where you came up with the things that you came up with. So I'm going to touch on choosing assessments quickly. We're going to do a poll and then we're going to take a break. So there's no single type of assessment that provides the complete picture of that learning, but choosing the right type or a combo kind of gives you that more accurate measurement of how closely they're really learning what you want them to learn or what you need them to learn. And so we're just going to review some general concepts of different types and when they kind of fit. And I got to go back to the polls and I will launch this poll. And this one I tried to make it specific to your discipline, but if the objective is to apply lab safety procedures, and you can think of that as standard precautions if you're not really into the lab one. Apply is supported by this demonstration of proper attire and PPE for entering the lab. So which of these assessments do you think might be most appropriate for this? Yeah. Okay. We may have lost a few people, but everybody is pretty much saying it's either the top one or the bottom one. My gut would say, you know, have them do a demonstration, but a discussion board where they are recalling. It's good and it's close. It might not be an actual application. So that's the only reason why I would guide you towards the first one. But y'all are getting that, so thank you. So I think y'all pretty much got that. And that was just a continuation of the poll. It was notes for myself. So there's our puppy. So we can take a quick break if you guys want. I know that we're going to be finishing up at noon, but we should be able to, because the assessments, we're just going to, I think a lot of it you know, and you're going to be surprised at how much of it you already do that you didn't necessarily know you did. So how about it's 11:38. How about come back at 1:45? And that way you can go to the bathroom real quick and grab a drink of water. So it's 11:45. I don't really see anybody's faces, but I know that sometimes we turn that stuff off. So I am going to start. Hey, there's all my folks. And it is nice to see the faces even when we have to Zoom. So so thank you, everybody. I hope that was a nice little break. And I will thank you again at the end, but I do want to thank everyone for being the guinea pigs, for being the first school to come through this and help me a little bit better with timing. I will definitely do a break earlier for the next go round. So thank you guys. But having said that, time is getting a little bit short. So assessment types, and I know you guys know this, but just a quick overview. They're formative or summative. We're doing formative either before, like a pretest, or during instruction, like some sort of midterm assignment. And it's in relation to the learning goals, and it's to provide feedback for you and for them as to where everybody is. And so for the student, how they're doing, and for you, if there needs to be some adjustment in the instruction. And then the summative assessment is, you know, it's the higher stake thing. It's judging their skill or their knowledge. And it's usually at the end, but you know, they can certainly be along and along. So just ahead of this, you know, some of these make total sense, but we will be offering an alternative assessment workshop later in the semester. So if once we get to that part, you find it really intriguing, then know that there will be more that comes along. But objective test, that's what we all know, that tried and true thing where it's either multiple choice or it's just a test. But, you know, tests are the good, bad, and the ugly. They're convenient, and they're easy to administer and score, and they allow you to focus on several specific topics. Like, you know, in midterm, they need to know how to be able to spell. You know, those things, that's super important. The drawbacks are, you know, they're better for those simple levels of processes like remembering and understanding that can compartmentalize the learning, and they can be subjective, even though scoring may be objective. The creation of the test is subjective, and a lot of times based on an individual perspective. So sometimes when you get a course that's been written by someone else, that's why you're making those adjustments, and you're using your instructor choice to change things throughout the semester. So, you know, selected response, multiple choice, true, false, matching. And then there's the constructed response type, which are more fill in the blank, short answers, show your work. They're still objective tests, but obviously there's some shades of leveling there. And they can reflect a range of the cognitive processes, even though it's generally the lower ones. And it's about what students learn, not just content. There's a variety that provides a more complete picture of student learning. So we're going to talk on all of those. But the applying the objective tests, again, they're most frequent and they're most effective in those first two. And I'm not saying you can't use them other places, but that's just kind of for you to kind of think about as you're plotting. You know, if everything is down here, maybe your tried and true objective test is the best way. So, you know, don't write something off just because we say it's the good, bad, and the ugly. I mean, there's value to it. Essays, you know, depending on discipline, I mean, I know we always say we can work essays into anything, but they do allow the students, you know, to demonstrate their ability to understand, apply, analyze, kind of go up a little bit and evaluate and create. So there's a lot of that going on. And it's flexible because it can be tailored to most types of the cognitive processes, and it can be combined with the objective test, but it can stand alone. So it kind of gives you that flexibility. And, you know, use an essay when you want the students to be deeply engaged in the subject. And, you know, in healthcare, it might be that you want them to talk about empathy. And so, you know, that might be appropriate for an essay or an essay question or discussion board. And because when we say essay, we don't necessarily mean a 5-page essay with 1-inch margin. You know, it can be the way that works best for you guys. But that's especially if you want them to evaluate information and concepts. But you have to be clear about how they're going to be graded. And don't underestimate your time. Your time is extremely important. And, you know, there's always the person who thinks I can do 5 sections and have an essay in all of them and it'll be okay, I'll stagger it out. Just know your limits is all I'm saying. You do what you need to do, but you have to also take care of yourself. But the meaningful feedback is crucial because it helps students incorporate their progress, and then again, consider incorporating that into objective tests. Like I said, essay can be essay question, a paragraph. It doesn't necessarily have to be that big, massive thing. But, you know, essay questions take more time to grade. D2L can't grade it for you. So again, time, think about all of that, because you do need to give them feedback in a timely manner. And then they're most effective in this blue area: apply, analyze, evaluate, create. They can be used for a wide range of knowledge and the processes. Procedural knowledge is great out here because although the performance of the skill is best assessed by direct observation, an essay could demonstrate basic knowledge of the procedure. So I just wanted you to know, I'm not saying you can't use it for that. Just, you know, it might be better to do some sort of presentative model. Concept maps, these might not be as appropriate. For your discipline, and they may be great, but I think you could use them, like if you wanted them to. Concept map is more than just like a thought bubble map. It could be used in anatomy to show that they understand how everything connects. But it does encourage deeper understanding. It encourages, you know, that complex critical thinking, and it stimulates long-term memory and some deep understanding. And again, they have to incorporate levels into a concept map. They have to be able to identify, but then they have to classify and organize too. And it takes that new knowledge with an existing knowledge and lets them move forward. And it can be formative or summative, and it provides a literal picture of the knowledge that they've learned. So it's just something to keep in mind. And, you know, recognize we don't all structure concepts the same way mentally. So it is one of those nice alternative ways to allow students to represent information, because it allows for that individual interpretation, unless there's a reason that that's not okay. And then there's directed and undirected. They can even be somewhat directed or not directed at all. But you use a directed one when it's something specific. Like I was saying, you know, it can't really have a lot of self-interpretation. And And then a more directed one, an undirected one is when it's maybe about empathy. Maybe they talk about how they get to an understanding with the patient or meet the patient where the patient is. But when you grade those, you can use a simplified rubric or a point system. So I don't want you to even think that's a pain. You know, you could use a simple rubric for that. And concept maps kind of flow across the whole thing. You can use the directed ones down in the lower levels, or you can use the undirected up high. And so, you know, that way you could kind of have the mix of and variety of things that they're doing, regardless of the level of understanding that they need to have. And then this is the one that projects and performances that I was kind of leaning into when I was saying we'll have more training later. It won't just be on projects and performances, but that workshop later about alternative ways of doing things will come here. So projects and performances, I don't want you to think that means you've got to set aside an entire week of class for kids to do whatever. Sure, maybe, but you know, it might be a situation where everybody is in the lab and they're going to demonstrate standard precautions. Clinicals already need that, so you're not having to change stuff, you know. Or if they're in pharmacy technician and they have to go out and, you know, do their clinical work at the hospital, that's already there. Yes, it can be speech presentations, it can be debates if you feel maybe you're discussing medical ethics and you think a debate is appropriate. Yes, set aside some time, but I want everyone to know that a project and a performance assessment, you're probably doing it already. And if you're not, you're probably real close. So I just don't want everyone to think that's a whole nother thing I got to come up with. So just again, you know, I keep harping on feedback. It is crucial. And if it's a big project or performance that goes over the whole course or something, you might have to have weekly or biweekly check-ins and guide the understanding of creation versus just them doing this poster at the end, because it's not really about that. And with your grading, you know, just make sure you're clear, and it should reflect the observable goals from the learning objectives. And again, you can use a rubric or a checklist. So, you know, that helps you follow along and, you know, be able to support what you've come up with. And those kind of fall, the nice thing about these is instead of just being down at the end or just being up at the top, it's right from 2 to 5. So, you know, it's pretty flexible about how you can use a performance or a special project in a variety of things. So believe it or not, I took it up to the wire. But just so you know, today we talked a lot about the theory, and I know that the theory can be a drag, but I hope you got something from it. As you move forward, you'll probably be getting this information either from your deans or your department chairs, but there will be next steps where you can get together, and we're not sure if that's going to be with CTE or within your schools, but y'all can get together and work through maybe updating your objectives and the measurability and the observability. And that's why you'll have access to all of the information out in that folder. And I've included more stuff than what we talked about today that's just supporting documents, good information to have. So all of that's there, but you're always welcome to reach out to us. And then the idea is that after you've made some changes at some point, which so it could very well be the next time you teach, after that, you know, you're going to assess how it went, what worked, what didn't. And that's a conversation for your schools, because those disciplines, we do know that your disciplines are very varied across the college, and some things work for you that don't work for other people, but the theory hopefully will work for you. I will email everyone after, you know, maybe Monday, again with the link to the folder, so you can get in there and download anything that you would like. And it will have my contact information, obviously, in the email, so you don't have to write this down or anything. But that is today. I hope that it was worth your time, guys. I know that it's always hard to sit through a lot of training, and I appreciate, you know, everyone's being involved in the activity and answering the polls. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. I'm going to close the meeting for you so you can all go do whatever you do on Friday afternoons.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.